I don't believe we all should manage our diabetes in the same way. I don't think we all have to manage in the same way to be successful.
I genuinely believe that every person living with type 1 diabetes, or if you're on insulin, you're type 2, same situation. If you're on a pump, you should know how to transition from a pump to MDI and vice versa in case ever wanted a pump break.
If you're hungry in the evening, you should eat and just figure out what works for you.
There are people that we work with, they're eating 500, and I'm not exaggerating, 500 grams of carbs and a ton of calories too. But, on top of that, there's people eating 30 and they're both doing great. And it's really just finding what's going to work for your body.
I always travel with glucose and always have. I will never put myself in a situation where I don't have glucose with me.
Nobody's immune. Everybody makes a mistake in diabetes land.
Welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode.
What's going on? Welcome to the next episode of the live episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast for National Diabetes Awareness Month. And I get to bring an amazing individual who's done everything in the nutrition, fitness, and diabetes world. And I'm grateful to call her one of my very good pals. We've got Christel from Diabetes Strong. What's up? What's going on? I was going to say it's so wild because I feel like we talk constantly, but then I never actually see you like this, which is pretty.
We just have to do video calls.
For real. I feel like FaceTime, there's no excuse. It's 2024, right? Like there should be
Exactly.
zero excuse. But as we go into this, of course, as people may remember from last week, you can ask questions all throughout. And then what we'll do is we'll talk a bunch. We'll drop some knowledge on all areas of diabetes, some fun stuff you can take away. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A so you can also ask questions then as well. I've got someone making sure we've got all the questions being aggregated so we don't forget any of them. But in case someone's never seen you before, Christel, in case someone's like, who is this lady? Why is she here? Why is Ben bringing her? Tell just a little bit about you.
Yes. Who am I? My name's Christel, as Ben just said. I've been living with type 1 diabetes since 97. So I keep saying it's 26 years. It can't continue to be 26 years. So I guess I'm coming up on 27 years this December, which is next month. So it's
That's horrible.
It's so long. I can't believe it. But so type 1 for a really long time. People usually are a little baffled when I say I've been managing with MDIs, multiple daily injections, since day one. And I still do that. And I still think that's the best option for me. I'm one of those people, I'm very into choice. In the sense that I don't believe we all should manage our diabetes in the same way. I don't think we all have to manage in the same way to be successful. And for me, MDI is just, it works. So I do that. And I also wear a CGM. I've been wearing a CGM since about 2013, 2015, I'd say. And why am I here outside from me living with diabetes? Well, I know Ben because Ben and I have been working together for a really, really long time. I started something called Diabetes Strong, which is started out as a fitness website for people living with diabetes. It's now expanded to being for people living with any type of diabetes, all sort of topics. We don't just cover exercise anymore. So if you haven't checked that out, please do that. And Ben started writing for Diabetes Strong a while back. And he did some really solid content on exercise and diabetes and nutrition and all that good stuff. And that's kind of how we got to know each other. And been very fortunate to also bump into each other over the years at all sorts of events. So we do have some few different flexing photos from here and there.
So I just saw one the other. Someone was like, "Wait, so who's the guest?" And so I revealed to one individual person. I was with them in person. Like, all right, it'll be okay. And I had to pull up a picture. I'm like, "Where is this?" I'm like, 2019. Like, what happened? Holy cow!
Happened.
What I used to be so cute. No, I'm just kidding. But the big thing though, it's wild because I feel like, and I just for anybody listening to this right now, I really feel like, and I have to say this to you too, Christel, that you really gave me my start into the diabetes world. So I was, I was in school. I wasn't a dietitian yet. I was a strength and conditioning specialist. I already was that, but I hadn't really done anything. I didn't have a real footprint in the diabetes landscape. And you were the first one that ever said, hey, let's give you an opportunity to do something and write some articles and see how this goes. And the first article I wrote was something I think about like morning high blood sugars. And it was really, really like it popped off right away. And I was like, all right, good. I got a good first impression. Let's go. And then the rest I feel like was history from there. But I'm super, super grateful for that, initial push that you were able to help give me so that I can give back to this amazing community that we get to be a part of every day. So with that too, I know you mentioned MDI, and I feel like that's a really important topic because I'm not going to say it's taboo these days, but a lot of people, they immediately, I got to get on a pump. I got to get on the Omnipod. I got to get on Tandem or Medtronic or, the iLet now is another one, but you're always stuck true to MDI. So tell us a little bit about why. Like, have you ever tried a pump? And it's not at all saying, oh my God, it's a bad thing, but it's more so just for people to get a better understanding as to what life can look like with MDI and being successful with that.
And I have tried an insulin pump. I actually even tried, no, blanking, the one where you did the algorithm yourself. So the super.
Oh, the DIY loop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm doing one right now. Yes.
So I've been like all the way in the geek, like into the weeds of it. And I think insulin pumps are brilliant. A hybrid closed loop, brilliant. As you mentioned, the island where you don't have to count carbs, brilliant. It's just not the right solution for me. So I, as I said, tried an insulin pump, and my experience was that it ended up being more work for me, simply because I am, as you know, very, very active individual.
Sure.
And as probably a lot of your viewers know, when we exercise, just going for a walk, or if we do resistance training, whatever, it's going to impact our blood sugars. And especially with cardiovascular exercise, it's going to sort of hypercharge that insulin that we have in the body. And I just found that with an insulin pump, having that rapid acting insulin going 24/7 meant that I felt like I had to manage a lot to not go low all the time. So even just going for a walk, I found that to be extremely challenging on an insulin pump. Of course, you can discontinue, you can reduce your basal rates, you could do all these exciting things, or exercise mode is now also a thing. But again, for me, and also it's probably because I've been doing it for so long, MDI is just easy. My long-acting insulin hardly gets impacted by exercise. So that means that I can do a lot of things without having to sit down and sort of think through, should I do this or that with my insulin settings, or do I need to eat more? So for me, it's just easier. So I think that's the short explanation.
Well, I feel like too with that, right? Because like you said, it's easier. And I almost would equate it to like any type of car, right? You're getting from point A to point B, you're getting where you need to go, but you're saying, hey, I don't need to have the crazy like heated seats and the crazy other features and the super lights and the, moon roof, but you're like, hey, I got where I needed to go. It worked and I'm still in control and I'm fine.
I don't think MDI is for everyone. I think MDI only works if you're willing to take all the insulin injections that you need to take in order to maintain a blood sugar in the range that you desire. Because I talk to people who are like, well, I don't want to take injections all the time. I'm like, I get it. But then maybe that's not the solution for you. Maybe an insulin pump is a better idea where you like change the cannula, whatever, every 3 days. So I think, again, it comes down to what works best for you. I don't care about injections in the sense that I don't think they hurt. I use the tiny little needles, and it just works for me.
What would you say? And this, again, obviously everything's personal per person, right? But in your experience, what have you seen in terms of number of injections on average? Because some people might think, oh, I just have to dose for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and my long acting. So that's not that big a deal. Maybe the occasional correction. But I remember I did MDI, this is years ago as well. I think I was on it for 7 or 8 months. I was taking like 11, 12 injections a day on certain days. So have you found that to be a similar type of experience?
Well, right now I'm using a long-acting insulin that I'm splitting in 2. So that's 2 doses already there, right? Yep. Let's say that I eat 3 or 4 main meals as well. But 4 main meals sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
And then a few corrections. So I think like I average 8 to 10 a day.
And I feel like, again, for someone who's listening, has maybe never considered MDI, or maybe they thought, hey, this seems interesting, but it seems like a lot. Like, it can be a lot. You have to dial up, and hopefully, making life easier. The InPen, I think, is a great option to take some of the thinking out of it.
We have to talk about the InPen. I'm so about the InPen. I love the InPen.
I love the InPen, but trying to make your life as easy as possible, but you're going to inject. And I think one of the funniest things, I have to share this. I don't think I've actually ever shared what I'm about to say, but I was doing MDI. I was getting really used to just injecting straight into my tricep. And I was, going. I was not rotating my site the way that I probably should have been. And so I started to get scar tissue, but because it was my tricep, it was right on where the muscle was. I was like, oh, my tricep's getting bigger. This is great. And then I figured out, like, why is it only this tricep and not that one? And I learned, unfortunately, it was not quite the case.
No, you need to rotate.
Just like if that's one takeaway for people, just like with an insulin pump, you do have to rotate your injections, up, down, right arm, left arm. It can't just be the same spot again and again, or it's not going to go well, and the absorption won't go as well either. But the InPen, you were very hyped up.
I'm very excited.
I am so hyped about the InPen, but please share your...
So I got a InPen pretty much as soon as it was released in the States. I believe it's still only in the States, and I don't even think
I think that's accurate.
So InPen, basically, to those out there, no, it's a smart pen. It's a smart insulin pen. So I call it equivalent, basically, of an insulin pump. It does all the same things, except from actually, automatically deliver insulin. So it has a bolus calculator. That means that I can type in how many carbs am I eating, what my blood sugar is, and it will suggest, it won't tell me, it will suggest how much insulin I should take. And I can then choose to do it or not do it. I guess it's just like an insulin pump. You can override as well. But what is really cool as well is it keeps track of everything. It automatically Bluetooths from the pen to an app on your phone. How much insulin are you taking? So also, how much active insulin do you have on board? Which is one of those numbers that I think not enough people pay attention to, especially if you're on MDI, because how the heck do you remember? Active insulin on board tells you, well, when you inject insulin, just go in and out. It stays in the body for, average 3 to 5 hours?
Yeah, I'd say 3 to 5. Technically, you would argue the last little bit of the tail is close to 5 hours. But for most people, 90% is gone in 2 hours. And within 3 to 4, the rest of it typically goes.
Yeah. So I think if anyone is sitting out there with an insulin pump, we could look up the insulin duration in your settings, and you can see where your doctor set it. I think the doctors usually set to 2 hours. 2 or 3 hours.
I think most of them typically I've seen 3.5, but either way, to that point, I know with, for example, Control IQ, it has to be set to 5. There's no changing it. There's no option because it wants the full amount. I will say some of the algorithms are a little conservative for my liking, but at the same time, they also have to be. But
it's a safety thing.
To your point, right? Like tracking the active insulin when on MDI, life-changing.
Also, just like doing the calculations, because I can do the calculations. It's not just about, so I do carb counting, so I count my carbs. So one thing is my carb ratio that tells me how much insulin should I take for my carbs. That's great. But then there's also the other part of the calculation, how much should I take for correction? How much should I add, or how much should I deduct? And then again, active insulin and all that. I think just having a device that calculates this, keeps track all of this, just clears up mind space that I can use for something else.
Well, you've had it for 27 almost years. I've had it. I just celebrated 25 in August. So we both had it for a while, and we both, I'd like to think, are pretty qualified to say that our brains get taken, a lot of the bandwidth gets taken away. Like you literally, like, it feels like sometimes there's instances where I'm mid conversation with someone, and then there's like half of my brain's hard drive is talking to them, and then half of it is then trying to calculate, like, well, I have 1.2 active. And I have to figure out, we're about to go walk for like 45 minutes. What do I need to do here? Do I need food? Do I not need food? And then just having that burden taken off a little bit. Of course, pumps will do the same thing, but with a pen, life-changing. And my favorite aspect is the half unit.
Yes.
Half units on those. And those, I don't know how people go without half units most of the time, because they're like, oh, I need to take a unit. Well, what if you don't need a whole unit? What if you just need a half?
So, I mean, what I often tell people is if you want a pre-filled pen, you can do the junior pens. Those have half units as well. So that's usually the trick there.
if the docs are willing to do it, though. That's the thing I've sometimes heard where people are like, oh, my doctor only gets me the full unit pens. I'll be like, hey, get a junior pen. They're like, oh, well, the doctor. I have seen that before. So it's tough. It's not ideal. But then that becomes a situation where it's figured, okay, am I taking less, but doing something else? I'm not eating more carbs to compensate. But the InPen being able to do the half unit, I think, is just massive. And I really think this is a good peek into life of somebody with or on MDI, just simply because it doesn't get talked about the way that it should. And I genuinely believe that every person living with type 1 diabetes, or if you're on insulin or you're type 2, same situation. If you're on a pump, you should know how to transition from a pump to MDI and vice versa, in case ever wanted a pump break. Like you're ever like, hey, you know what? There's times I want to throw my pump out the window, right? So I need a break. Let me switch to MDI for the weekend and then come back. Or, oh, I'm going on a surfing expedition. I don't know how to surf, but it sounds great, right? Like that could be fun. I don't want to be attached to something. Let me take off the pump and go on to MDI and then come off of that. I think this is the critical skill that people have to know how to do.
And now I don't even know how it is now. Do people get started on insulin pumps right when they get diagnosed? Or do you know?
It
I don't even
doesn't
know.
tend to be, from what I've seen, because we've had the record of a patient coming to our practice was they filled out the form while they were in the hospital still, which is insane. And so like 2 days later, I'm talking with them and everyone seems to be MDI at the beginning, but what I've seen is a lot faster. It used to be your MDI, you go for 3, 4, 5 months. Okay, now you're ready for a pump. Of course, it depends on the doctor, but now I see a lot of times your MDI and it might be 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So, like a month and a half, 2 months, and then they go straight to, I've seen Omnipod a lot out of the gate recently, but that of course subject to change depending on the doctor, et cetera.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find that part fascinating where they're gravitating to it more because it does make life easier, but has its own set of pitfalls where if the site goes bad, you're in a not great situation versus in your case, there is no site to go bad. So as long as you get your long acting, at least you are covered. And I can imagine that gives you a lot of relief at certain times versus
I've never been in DKA ever.
Not all of the wood.
Not even at my diagnosis. And to your point, as long as I remember to take my long acting, there's not a whole lot of risk for me going into DKA. And also the InPen does have a reminder. So it does pop up. I set it to give me the reminder to take my dose because sometimes I'm like, did I take it? Didn't. Because you keep doing the same routine day over, every day. Sometimes it's a blur. So having it logged in the app, I can go back and like, oh yeah, I did take it because I can see I did that at this hour.
And especially if it's splitting it twice, right? Because then you're like, I know I took it in the morning, I take it in the afternoon. I don't really know, or not evening, but
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, I like the reporting as well because I do work with my endocrinologist and being able to send her both my blood sugars, I can wear a CGM, so that's also pulled into the InPen. So I can send her a complete report and we can actually talk about, okay, this is the amount of insulin I took at 2 p.m. Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks ago. And this is what happens to my blood sugars. We don't have to go through that whole guessing game of, hey, what did you do 2 weeks ago? And do you remember how much insulin you took and all these fun questions?
Well, I can't even remember what I ate 2 days ago. So remembering my dose 2 weeks ago would definitely be a challenge, I would say. But I'd be curious too, because I know, of course, obviously creator of Diabetes Strong, formerly the Fit blog, if my brain still serves me. Well, yeah, look at that throwback. But that being said, of course, exercise has been a huge thing in your life. And when it comes to the fueling side of things, given the MDI status, but what have you noticed just from a fuel perspective in general as a person with diabetes that you have to take into account differently than someone who might not have diabetes at all? Like what's been extra helpful for you from a fueling perspective that someone might be able to take away and say, hey, I know that I've heard from Christel that I do this pre-workout and it helps me keep my blood sugars happy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've always been active, more or less, let's say it like that. And then the reason why I got into writing about diabetes and exercise and focus on that was because I was competing in bodybuilding competitions. And I did that with no specialized diabetes support. That's kind of also again why I created the website because I couldn't find it anywhere. So I was working with a trainer who did not know anything about diabetes, who was only focused on building the right amount of muscle and fueling my body in the right way. So my approach to home fuelful workouts were not diabetes focused. They were just like, general focused, fitness focused. So what I had to do was then figure out, okay, how do I make this work best for my body? And I'm one of those people who don't necessarily, again, I kind of said that before. I don't think there's one way that's the right for all of us. There's not a one fits all. So I had to sort of figure out what worked best for me. And also, for example, my trainer really wanted me to eat before bedtime for my muscles to have something to work with overnight. So like something high protein. And we started out, I think it was with something that had carbs, fats, as well as protein, which is great. But as we know, protein slows down the release of glucose. And it kind of like, it gave me a weird wonky increase overnight that didn't really work for my blood sugars. So I ended up taking out the fats. So we got a little bit more of a heftier increase at first, but at least I could catch that, again, being on MDI, I can catch that initial increase with insulin, and I won't be bothered by a second increase overnight while sleeping. So something like that. I still think that if you're hungry in the evening, you should eat and just figure out what works for you. I don't do big meals. I usually do protein there. For pre-workouts, again, when I did bodybuilding, it was like a big thing. You had to eat this and that before. And then there was a whole metabolic window they were talking about right after, which has now been disproven as being like bro science. So there I would usually focus on, and I still do actually, carbs and protein. That's kind of like my pre-workout go-to. I don't do that much fat these days just because my body tends to get really, really insulin resistant when I eat a lot of fats, which is just an observation for my body. And also, I mean, I've tried different diets as well. I tried keto and it does not work for me. My body gets so angry. It is so angry.
I can see that.
It's really angry. My blood sugars are awful. And even my endo was like, can you please stop this? Just like go back to eating a varied diet, which is then what I did.
Well, in keto, I feel like a lot of people with diabetes will gravitate because they'll say, okay, fewer carbs, it's the answer. I'm going to be great. My blood sugars will be perfect. And I remember there were even around the time where I first met you, where I was really, really low carb. I was low carb for a very long time. It's hilarious looking at it now. And like I post these things where I'm like, oh, this is 226 grams of carbs. And I ate all of it in one sitting. And back then that would have been more than 5 days of food for me of carbs. But I think the big thing is like keto can, because of the fat, like you said, for a lot of people induce that insulin resistance and you can't really break through it. The only way you get through it is the fat digests. And then you can kind of say, okay, fat's out of the system. Now I can clear. But for me, there were times I would just sit at 160, 170. I've seen patients with the same situation. Hey, I want to go low carb. Okay, cool, let's do it. And then their blood sugars, they're flat, but they just sit higher than they want to, and they can't really do much to bring it down. And that can become a problem over time, especially if there's not a strategy to deal with it. So I think to the point you brought up before, which is so important for people to remember, there is no best way to do it. Like I personally think these days I'm eating 120 to 150 grams of carbs. There are people that we work with, they're eating 500, and I'm not exaggerating, 500 grams of carbs and a ton of calories too. But on top of that, there's people eating 30 and they're both doing great. And it's really just finding what's going to work for your body the same way that you did. And I'm on that same note, curious, those protein and fat pre-workout options. People always ask me, what's your favorite thing? And it drives me nuts because like I have two go-tos that I use, but like I always want to know other people. So what's one of yours or a couple of yours?
Well, right now, okay. Also, I'm doing an experiment where I'm experimenting with my influence and stuff like that. So I'm keeping it very consistent. I'm eating the same thing for breakfast, and I have been for 3 weeks. So most people are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, this is so boring." It's becoming a little boring. But that's also my pre-workout meal because I work out after, like in the mid-morning. And what I'm eating right now is sprouted bread, so Ezekiel bread, which I find is really good for my blood sugars. I only eat one serving, which is one slice of toast and like half a muffin. And then I do egg whites and one whole egg. Sometimes with spinach.
When I want to get fancy, I throw some spinach on there.
Or Tabasco as well.
I mean, the Tabasco, I could totally see making it work. I would still eat that regularly anyway on its own without any of the, what is it, accoutrements. There we go. Good word. SAT.
I'm also experimenting different sugar-free ketchup because some of them are really bad, but find some.
I don't even know if I kind of want to go down the rabbit hole on sugar-free ketchup. I'm over here like,
Too. Some of it is also the biggest pleasant, but some of it is actually really
please share more about your findings, because I feel like the only, I don't call it sugar-free, but the only like non-extra nasty corn syrup stuff that I've had that's been good has been G. Hughes. And that's the only brand where I'm like, their barbecue sauce and their honey mustard's amazing. But the rest of it, I'm like, I try to find lower sugar. And I'm like, ew, this is gross.
The best one I found is the Heinz one, but with that.
Really?
Good. But I haven't been able to find it the last month, which is really annoying because now I'm doing this experiment where I really need ketchup. So,
Man, I'm actually surprised that Heinz is like the one. So to me, I'm like, oh, it's got to be some little company or littler company. And it ends up being, the goat of ketchup, right?
ketchup.
What else have you tried historically that's worked for you from a blood sugar standpoint pre-workout? Again, just curious, because I always tell people, I do like a half a turkey sandwich or like a turkey wrap, or sometimes I'll do half a protein bar. I typically work out fasted, so I don't really eat anything. And that's just because I do it right when I wake up, and then I after, and I eat plenty after, so I don't have to worry about it.
I really like yogurt, Greek yogurt. So I do for those, I actually also do the sugar-free ones because I think a lot of the yogurts are hidden sugar bombs.
Yes.
So I pay attention. I really like and this is not an ad for the but the Greek yogurts from, okay, so it's not an ad because I don't remember what they're called. It'll come to me in a second. But you can get some with a lot of different, Chobani. There we go. You get syrup, sugar, Chobani, Greek yogurts.
Amazing. Yes.
And they're really good.
And
they're amazing good. I buy little cups because then I don't have to scoop it. I still have my kitchen scale. I measure out everything. It makes my life easier. And I know for a lot of people that's too much work. For me, it's not. It's worth it.
Well worth it.
Yeah. So I measure out all my carbs. I measure out anything that I think can impact my blood sugars. And also back to, we talk a lot about carbs, right? Because carbs are what hits sugar most aggressively. But I think also eating high protein, which is what I do, I also have to think about that when I think about dosing. Especially if I'm not, I usually eat a carb with it, but if I'm not, it becomes a little bit more tricky. You should probably explain that, but it's just.
Gladly, because carbs spare protein, right? So if you have, I'm making all of this up because it's dinner time and I'm probably going to eat dinner right after this, right? So if I made pasta and I had a bunch of chicken with it, right? Let's say it's whole wheat pasta or banza pasta, chickpea, whatever. Sounds good. Carbs are there. That will spare the protein. The protein is not going to impact my blood sugar. But if I say, hey, I'm going to have 10 ounces of chicken and I'm going to have some asparagus with it. Sounds good. Chicken depends on, the quantity, but 10 ounces is a lot. It's like 70 grams of protein.
That's a lot.
I won't notice it right now. But what will happen is if you watch your blood sugar, if you do this, you can try this at home. Just, be smart about it and talk to your care team before you do it. But you'll watch your blood sugar creep up like 45 minutes, 60 minutes later, you'll start to see it creep. You'll creep up a little more and a little more and a little more. And then for certain things like steak or like pork, sometimes eggs, cottage cheese for me is a nightmare. I will just explode to the moon if I'm not careful. And that's because the protein will break down into glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis, and there's no carbs to spare it. So because of that, your body's like, hey, I don't need all of this protein. Let me break it down. And it goes really conveniently up the chain to turn into glucose, and your blood sugar will go up. So that's why if you've ever gone somewhere and you're like, oh, all I had was steak and, broccoli, and why did my blood sugar rise that serious? So, but yeah, to your point, people have to be aware. No one talks about protein. No one talks about fat. I like to think I talk about it a good amount because I nerd out on this stuff. But yeah, I think you bring up a great point there. But give like one other good protein carb.
Well, you just hating on one of them. I love cottage cheese.
Well, I love cottage cheese. I absolutely love it. My issue with cottage cheese is if I don't eat stuff with it, or I just eat like a cup and a half of it, then that was my example of when you mentioned, when you're like, oh, my coach just like eat something before bed. That was like the first thing I learned when I was in learning bro status before I did anything. I was in college. I'm like, I got to learn how to do this the right way. So I ate a bunch of cottage cheese. I'd go to bed at 1:10, wake up at 2:40 and wonder what just happened. It's cottage cheese.
Well, I think that's also serving size difference here. I don't eat that much. So I usually stick like to half a cup, which is a serving, which of course won't give you as much protein. So if you just optimizing for protein, then,
Yeah.
but so I think it's also about, especially, you and I are different sizes, we're different sizes and all that. So we will also need different amounts of food.
Right.
And sometimes some people are like, this is not working for me. I'm like, okay, that's fair. Have you tried, a different serving size? Or have you tried to combine it with something else? Because it might mean that you just need to eat half a cup instead of a full cup, or that you need to, add some strawberries or whatever, or berries. I had cucumbers and tomatoes
Cucumber. I need to try that. That actually sounds good, low
and
key.
pepper.
Ooh. I've always thought of cottage cheese as kind of like a sweet thing. Like, hey, I'm going to throw my blueberries in, I'm going to throw my strawberries in it, but never, ever the other direction. That sounds really.
But going to the video, like, I think it was published a week and a half ago, and I mentioned this. People are same as you, like mind blown. Just like, wow, I didn't realize this was a novelty.
Well, because you can use cottage cheese in a bunch of recipes. Like we've made an Alfredo sauce with cottage cheese, but I don't think of it as cottage cheese because it's in the blender. So it's thrown. Now it's just Alfredo sauce. It was, Alfredo sauce. I don't even know what was in it. Amelia made it, but it was a bunch of different stuff. And then we blended it and I'm like, oh, I forgot there's cottage cheese. Well, eating it on its own in the savory fashion, I'm like, interesting.
Okay, now you have to try it.
I'm going to absolutely have to try it and then be like, oh, look, my blood sugar was fine because I actually had a dose for it. Which is, I think, hilarious, but a good reminder for people. A couple questions, and as I start going through these first couple questions, if you are watching this and you want to ask a question to me, Christel, both of us, start firing away, ask us questions. That is what we are here for. We'll definitely try to get to as many as we possibly can. So first one we've got here, and this is back to the MDI stuff for a second. Your favorite injection site? Because I'm sure you've tried plenty.
I still like my stomach. I don't know if that's like just a go-to, but aside from that, I like here on the back of the arm. So right below the delt, you can't see because I'm wearing a sweater. So I actually don't do it in the muscle, as Ben said, because when you do it directly in the muscle, that can speed up how fast insulin is absorbed. So I try to do it in the fatty tissue, right. So I have some there. If you're super lean, it might be smarter to find somewhere else.
And what's your least?
Or just do it directly in the muscle, but I did not recommend.
Be very careful if you go directly in the muscle with an injection because the blood sugar will just nosedive. What's your least favorite spot? Like, what's like the worst spot you've ever done?
There's some places on my thighs that I don't like to inject. So I don't have super meaty thighs. So I definitely do try to find something with a little bit more fatty tissue. So the thighs can really hurt. And I find like I bleed more there as well.
The few times I would do it in my like quad, I was like, ow, and I would always get a bruise and it was nasty and it was terrible. But yeah, I definitely find if you're trying to do MDI or thinking about it, you need to inject, definitely consider something where you have some more fatty tissue, subcutaneous, fat, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Another one we've got here is their daughter's been honeymoon since their diagnosis about 3 months ago. She's sports every single day. So what things would you suggest to keep blood sugar up during intensive activity? So they're doing juice and glucose gel and candy. So the typical suspects, but what else would you consider adding to that mix or maybe substituting?
I mean, I think honeymooning is really hard because then you still have the insulin production and you're also injecting insulin and all of a sudden you see insulin spikes. And so I understand that that's a very complicated time.
Yes.
So you probably have to fuel for exercise more intensely than you have to do later on. So when she's not honeymooning anymore, you probably lower her insulin and compensate in that way, or maybe do a combination. I like dried fruits. I find that those are fairly effective, like dates and stuff like that, if she likes it. Apples, But it's also if she's on the field. I don't know which. Did you mention which kind of sport it is?
No, if it's sports, it didn't say.
Okay, let's say you're on the field, you're running around. You can't really sit down, chow down an apple. It has to be like bite-sized something, right? So that's why I lean towards the dry fruit.
I would say. Well, I would say with what you said too, because the honeymooning, you have that rogue beta cell that decides to just spit out a little insulin here or there, and like, oops. But that being said, the biggest thing I would add to that mix is I would try to add where possible, be a little bit of protein. So a little bit before, maybe a little bit during, and that would be a perfect time for, hey, let me have half a protein bar during halftime or during a break or something, just because that hopefully should steady things out a little bit. But it's going to be a lot. And I kind of would treat this similar to how, someone, if they're trying to run a marathon or going really long distance, you're running around for 2 straight hours, let's say at a practice, I'm thinking consistent little bursts of glucose are going to be the biggest thing. And then some protein before, depending how long, maybe a little during, and for sure after, to keep everything as steady as possible. But that's my 2 cents, just because, protein stabilization is massive. And around exercise, I feel like it's absolutely critical. Also to help with recovery too.
And probably, and another thing, I don't know if, so since she's relatively newly diagnosed, it might not have gotten to like game day yet. So I think game day, a total different beast, because then also we have the adrenaline going and all of that. So you might see that she actually doesn't need as much for.
Such a good point. Because game day, I feel like, when I was playing baseball back in the day, when I'd practice, not that I would take, but I would drift down on game day. Oh no. I was trying to fight being like 250 the entire time. This was before CGMs. I was on a pump and I'm, testing every other inning, and it was absolutely brutal. But at the same time, game day is a whole different beast. But either way, anybody who has questions on that kind of stuff, obviously either of us are here to be able to help. Here's a good one. So this one is supplements that you recommend for energy or just in general for people with type 1 or type 2.
Well, I don't do supplements at all. So I don't even take a multivitamin. I try to eat like a berry diet. If I need to pick me up, I'll have a cup of coffee.
Love it.
Really?
It's all, like, people over rely on supplements, and it drives me bananas. Like, oh, hey, Ben, what's the best supplement for blank? And it's not that supplements are a bad thing, but they're literally meant to supplement the other stuff you're doing, right? So if your food's on point, if your sleep's on point, if your activity's on point, maybe you get that extra 10 or 15% from said supplement, but you shouldn't be relying on it as a first line defense. Well, to your point, I love the fact that you don't take literally anything except the occasional caffeine. I also wish I could do caffeine, but you don't want to see me with caffeine. It's not a good, I walls. I don't think I've had caffeine genuinely in like 20 years, because the last time I had it, I didn't sleep for like 3 days. So
Can have a shot or espresso before bedtime and sleep like a baby.
you and Amelia have that in common.
I would say back when I was like the whole bodybuilding thing, and also there was more bro science included, I did take pre-workouts once in a while. I didn't like it. I feel like my skin was crawling,
Ew.
which I understand that that's something that they add to make it feel like your skin is crawling, and it doesn't really do it. Yeah, it's a little nasty. But that was the only thing I did. I don't think it was basically just caffeine with a little bit of skin crawling added to it. No, I kind of just stopped, because also from all I've been reading, it seems like for the most part, most supplements, there are some that could benefit you absolutely, especially if you are in a deficit. If you go to your doctor, they do a float panel and they see, hey, you're in a deficit, you should do something about it, obviously, of course. But aside from that, the way that I sort of see it is a lot of them is just expensive things that you take and then they go through the system and pee them out.
Expensive urine is a lot of the time what I see it as. I would say for people, and I wouldn't necessarily even say this is for like energy per se, but just in general, I will say zinc, I think, is a really, really beneficial one, as long as it's not too much of a dose, because that can deplete copper and have other issues. But zinc and vitamin D are like the top 2 in my mind. Everything else, like I do post periodically where I'm like, okay, do you need this supplement? And I'll actually go read the papers and see what they have about diabetes in there, just because I'm curious. And there's a few where I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of interesting. But a lot of the times it's just like, it's very inconclusive, or we need more studies, or it's done in mice. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not a mouse, so that doesn't really help me. But I would say for most people, 90% of it is not supplement related, even more than that potentially. So I would try to not worry about the supplements too much.
How do you feel about creatine?
Oh, it's tough for diabetes because it's the most widely studied supplement in the world, right? So one could argue, okay, you're totally fine. It's really, really tough. Again, talk with your care team before you make any decisions if you're listening to this. But creatine, if you don't have kidney issues, you're probably okay. There's so many, right? So many cats. If you cycle on and cycle off of it, and if you do the correct dosing, and if you're being monitored by your doctor, etc. So like there's all these, disclaimers. If. I think it would be fine. I've never taken it personally. I've never really seen the need to. But some people I know have taken it and they've done amazing. But again, the kidney function is huge because if you have something wrong, even just like the most minor microalbuminuria where like you're, had protein in your urine, I wouldn't go near the 10-foot pole. Just because you don't even want the potential risk of that. Here's a good one. So I've been diabetic for 44 years, always MDI. I want to switch to a pump, but I have a mental block. How would I get over this? That is a good question. That's a tough one.
I guess it also depends on what the block is, right? Is it about having something on your body? Is it about leaving, your care to a device? I
Trusting.
think that can be different things. Or is it like learning a new technology? Or is it like doing something different than you've been doing for with the
44 years is a long time to feel like, hey, and you're what, 27 next month with diabetes and MDI. So like, I feel like it would be a similar boat for you, right? Where it's like, done it this way. Now you've obviously, gone and tried it before, but you still came right back. So
Well, I would say, and that maybe that's exactly the point, is you can try it and know that it doesn't have to be a forever choice. You can try it, and then if you don't like it, you can go back. Oh, you can try it and then shift between the two. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
That's my thought. That's exactly what I would say to do too, is if you're not sure and you have a block, and again, I don't know what the block is, but if someone has a block, try it. Most endos, most docs have the ability for you to get samples, or they know a rep who can give you samples. You could try it tandem, or if you want it, a pump or a Medtronic or whatever it is, and then try it out for a little bit. If you love it, go for it. If you don't like it, hey, give it back and it's done, right? Ideally, that should be the case. And I know for Omnipod, you for sure can do it because there's basically nothing to it. It's just the pod. So it shouldn't be too hard to get.
I think they advertise a trial period as well. I don't know if the other ones do that.
I think the other ones you'd have to go through your doc. I think either way, you're going to have to go through your doc, but I think
for sure you need a prescription. I mean, you can't do any of this without a prescription.
No, but at the same time, I think for the Omnipod, it's way simpler just because you get the little, oh, hey, here's my pod, boom, done. And everything's now on the phone finally. But either way, I think I would just say try it, but don't pressure yourself if you don't want to commit to it and stick with it. But at least, hey, I did try this. And they'd be like, ew, this is weird. I don't like it. You can take it off and go back. Like, it's fine. It will be okay.
People do the pump breaks, right?
One pump break.
Applications, or whatever it's called.
Oh yeah, I did one for 7 months. I've done them for random weekends here and there. It's totally, totally viable.
Yeah.
What is one moments within happened and how did you handle it?
So it just cut out. Unfortunately, we had that question.
Oh no. Did you ever had an oops moment with injections? And if so, what did you do to figure it out?
An oops moment, meaning like injecting too much?
I would imagine it would be like maybe you accidentally dosed your long acting twice or you took too much.
I just got a job as a management consultant, which is like an insane job where they expect you to work and not sleep. And they ran us to this introduction program. So basically we're not sleeping. And we're not sleeping for a few days, which means you're totally cuckoo. And I took my rapid acting insulin instead of my long acting insulin. And your heart sinks.
Oh my God.
Because it's like, oh my gosh, I just injected 20 units or whatever, 15, how many I took back then. Acting insulin. And I'm sitting here in a hotel. And I haven't slept. And I'm just really, really tired right now.
Yes. There we go.
We good?
Yeah, you're good now. It cut out what you said after you said you took the full amount of rapid acting, and then it cut out for like 10 seconds. So we missed the next part.
Oh, I took the full amount of rapid acting instead of long acting insulin. So that was like 15 or 20 units of rapid acting insulin. And what I was saying was I was there in a hotel and very tired for everything and not very impressed with myself. I always travel with glucose and always have. I will never put myself in a situation where I don't have glucose with me. So I usually travel with a whole jar of glucose tabs, and that saved me. I also went out and I found juice. And so what I did, which I talked to my endocrinologist about it later on, she's like, well, it was a good choice, but you could do better next time. So basically what I did was I went out for a lot of really rapid acting carbohydrates. So juice, glucose tabs. And what she just suggested was that if it ever happened again, that I add some fats. She actually was like, go grab a Mars bar, candy bar of some sort, because you're going to get the increase, but you're also going to get that slow release of glucose, meaning that you won't have to fight low blood sugars necessarily for, hours.
That experience I have had one time. It was on a pump though, ironically, and it was terrible. But to your a similar situation, except I had just eaten like a massive brunch. This is like 6 years ago. So it wasn't even that long ago. About 6 years ago. And I typed in 20 grams. Well, I thought it was 20 grams into the pump, but I really typed in 20 units. And so, so I was like chilling. I was doing my thing. And I went to go look at my pump for a second. I was like, why do I have 28 active units right now? Yeah. Well, I had eaten brunch from before, so I already had some active from before. And I'm like, I hope I didn't just do what I thought I just did. And lo and behold, this again happens to people all the time. Like nobody's immune. Everybody makes a mistake in diabetes land. I had taken 20 units. And so what I did in that moment was, what was my insulin to carb ratio? At the time, I think I was like 1-8. So all right, I need 160 grams of carbs. I already had the fat from the meal before. So to your point, it was set. And so I was not hungry in the slightest. And I just had 160 carbs, and gratefully, knocking on all the wood, I went down a tiny bit and just steadied out exactly where I was because my ratio was spot on, and I moved on. But man, that was unpleasant. 0 out of 10 recommend, because your whole wall over your chest, like, what just happened to me? Oh, and the same thing happened with you. And it's brutal because you can't undo it. It's not like you'd be like, oh, let me, just push undo on the, God, that's brutal. I don't recommend to anybody.
Yeah. I think it was also, there's so much fear, right? Because you realize the situation and like, oh my gosh.
Well, and then you're thinking, like in that case, I was by myself at the time. So I was like, all right, I'm by myself. I need to figure this out. I'm not going to just freak out. And the biggest thing is just like deep breath and say, okay, what do I have to do to figure out the situation with anything in diabetes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me respond. Let me move on. And then I'm done. But I know we've talked a lot. We've got a bunch of questions. There's a couple more that would be fun, but I feel like what we should do is get another episode and then talk about more stuff. Because a lot of punches I think were about weight loss. Yeah. Tips on weight loss for a 50-year-old female. Do I decrease carbs? What do I do? So I feel like we could have a very fun episode just about that, especially with the new year coming around the corner. So, which is hard to believe. So, but where can people find you if they want to learn more about Diabetes Strong and the life of Christel?
Well, Diabetes Strong. So Diabetes Strong is a platform. We have the website, which is our main platform. I also say we, it's not the royal we. I run it together with my husband. So that's the we. But the website is the main platform. You can, of course, find Diabetes Strong on Instagram, Diabetes Strong _IG, as well as on Facebook. And I have a Twitter channel, and that is me making videos about every 2 weeks and posting that. And that's everything, again, not just type 1, but for anyone with any type of diabetes. And yeah, I think that's about it.
And I'm just grateful we got to chat on here, catch up a little bit, but also educate the community a little bit more, make National Diabetes Awareness Month a little bit more awesome. And I will have this as a listenable podcast in the next couple days. So if you're someone who listens to the podcast, definitely be ready for that. And if you want to re-listen, if there's a part you missed or you want to listen to it again, it'll be on Apple, Spotify, all of the good places where you might find a podcast. And if you're listening and you enjoy it, definitely drop us a 5-star. We appreciate it. Yay. But with that, I appreciate you, Christel. I am going to definitely chat with you soon. Definitely going to have you back for a weight loss thing. I think that would be super, super epic.
Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.